Welcome back. This is Lecture Dose or Trace in the Civil War unit. Today we're focused on logistics, as pointed out by the big board in the back. Logistics, how I refer to this, is getting bullets and beans to the front lines. People who focus on strategy in war and not logistics are they're called the losers in most cases. Logistics is how are we getting information, people, and supplies to the correct locations in order to win a war. If you can't do those things, you are not going to win this war. And if you do, you got a little lady luck on your side because at this point, that's the only way it's going to factor in. Or you just have brute force. Your numbers overwhelm the other side to the point where logistics doesn't matter, which is possible. And there's many battles that you can talk about and wars you can talk about that may be a case. So, what are the logistical advantages of the North? It's something you're going to need to know because you have the North versus the South. One, this is not a logistical advantage. Don't use this as a logistical advantage because it's not. It's an advantage, not necessarily logistical depending. And it is the population 22 million to about 10. And with the 10 million in the South, remember 4 million are slaves that are not going to take a part in the war as far as directly fighting. They will help the South because the masters will take slaves with them to the battle or with them on campaign, and they'll dig trenches and they'll do other things. But really, they're not the same type of force that you're going to need winning a war. But 22 million to 10, right now, the South is disadvantaged there. But don't use that as a logistical disadvantage. Here's the ones I want you to pay attention to. One, telegraphs. Telegraphs are the way to communicate back then. It's like the telephone of the day. And the North had tons of these things. To get information from one location to another just like that is extremely beneficial for the North. Lincoln has basically a hub at the White House. Sorry, not the White House. It's in D.C. Where he basically just sends information out and gets information in, and sends information out and gets information in. He's able to talk to his generals almost in real time to tell them where to maneuver and where to go. Beneficial for the North directly. Railroads. If you have more railroads, you're going to win, at least back then, because you're able to transport men and ammunition and food and all these good things to the places you need to go. They're more rested, they're more supplied, they have a better chance of winning. And towards the end of the war, especially the last 2 years of the war, this really just impacts the war in a big way for the North side. And the last logistical advantage is manufacturing, building of stuff. The North was the manufacturing hub of the United States. The South was all about like just raw products, cotton and tobacco and stuff like that. And the North was manufactured products, building things, right? Machines. And they were able to take that manufacturing build that the North had and just transform it into a war factory, if you will, producing gun after gun and armament after armament. They had those three things. So they had trains, telegraphs, and then factories. With that, they're gonna run the show. Now that we got the logistics out of the way, let's talk about some stuff that happened in the war. So there's a development of a new type of bullet called the miniball. And if you've ever threw a football before, I want you to think of a football every time I say miniball. It is more of a football look to it. It's more like a modern day bullet, if you will, in the shape of it. And this changes the accuracy because we'll talk about the physics of this in class. You have spin and you have velocity, you have wind resistance, all these different things. All that will impact the possibility of your bullet meeting its target. And the mini ball gives that advantage to people who have it. There's more amputations because of this. The amputations are brutal too because you're talking less technology than today. Infection is a high killer back then because they didn't have the same type of medical equipment that we have today. But yeah, the mini ball, it's the newest, most improved version of a bullet that we had back then. And it's devastating to the people that are getting shot with it. Let's talk about the medical field a little bit. So Clara Barton, founder of the American Red Cross, a woman who's on the front lines caring for countless numbers of American soldiers during the Civil War. The foundation of the American Red Cross is going to be a huge thing for the United States. And not just for this war, but anymore afterwards, and not just for wars. These are used for it's still used today for many different aspects of our society. So we'll talk more about Clara Barton, not only in this unit, but also in the unit for women's rights, which is going to be after Christmas. So we'll just keep that in mind. Let's get to the next thing is the discovery of bromine. Bromine was a chemical that was extremely helpful at combating infection, a big killer of the Civil War. So the problem is it was discovered at the end of the war, so several people lost their lives. If this thing was discovered a little bit earlier, they wouldn't have lost their lives, but sometimes you just don't have that. Embalming is a big deal. You have tons of people dying, 600,000 plus total dying. Tens of thousands dying in certain battles over a couple days. That's a lot of dead people. And embalming allowed mostly people that were wealthy enough to pay for it to preserve the body long enough to get them back home to then have a funeral and say goodbye and mourn the loss of their loved ones. So embalming's a big deal back then. We'll talk more about embalming in class because I just know the process kind of in and out, and we'll talk about that in class. And then last thing is the idea of the invention of the camera. When you talk about wars prior to the Civil War, it was all like this, just conversational storytelling type of thing. And you could add some passion to it and you can get people invested in the story and they can be like, oh my gosh. But it's not the same as seeing it. And what happens is with the invention of the camera is you have people that can now see the devastation of war. And this puts a lot of pressure on Lincoln. And also it puts pressure on the South too, but puts a lot of pressure on Lincoln to end this war because now people are not just hearing about the devastation, they can see it. They can see the bodies, they can see the fields filled with the dead, and this does change how people view war. And considering this is the deadliest war we've ever had, it impacts people in a real way. Okay, that's kind of a quick run through of logistics. I'll get back at it next time.